we're in the Pachavega kitchen with Justin. This is Justin Waxman. He is a mushroom expert, and we're about to go into the fields and forage some wild mushrooms to show you exactly how to make your own dual extract tincture at home. Hey guys, we are here in the jungle on the island of Ometepe, Nicaragua, and I'm here with my friend Justin Waxman, and he is a mushroom expert. I know a lot about mushrooms, but this guy takes it to this next level. So I'm here to just ask you a few questions about mushrooms, the history, how they can really help us, our bodies, and humanity in general.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to come and talk to you guys about mushrooms, a topic that of course, I'm super passionate about, and I think that everybody has a reason to be passionate about because mushrooms are life. I mean, there is no life without mushrooms. I could explain in probably several hours about how this planet formed and how we got here, but to really make it really short, there's no life on this planet without fungus. They are decomposing and transforming and recycling everything that is organic on this planet, which is everything. And so whether it's oil spills or climate change that we're facing now, whether it's every branch and every leaf that falls from a tree seasonally and naturally, the thing that makes that soil once again is fungus. And the really cool thing about fungus and mushrooms generally is that they come in different categories. And I hear all the time, people, I don't know, should I touch them? Should I not touch them? How do you know when you're foraging in the wild what is edible and what might kill you?
Exactly. This is a huge question that we all have.
This is a huge question that we all have. And it's a fair question because generally there are four categories of mushrooms, right? There's gourmet edible mushrooms, the yummy stuff we like to eat, my favorite being jelly ears, oysters, and things like this. There is obviously poisonous ones that could shut down your liver or your kidney, and so you need to be careful. There are hallucinogenic ones that contain psilocybin that grow all over the world as well. And then there's medicinal ones. And to just say, okay, if one out of the four I should be concerned about, doesn't necessarily mean you should be afraid of the whole general category, because there's 3 out of 4 categories which are quite amazing. And even the poisonous one, although it might be poisonous for us, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's dangerous or bad, because there are other animals and insects that can eat poisonous mushrooms that don't affect them the same way. And so everything is playing its role in nature, and everything is accurate. And I'd like to think that we are here because of mushrooms, and our purpose is to serve the mushrooms in a way, because every time we pick a mushroom and we walk around with it, we are spreading its spores and allowing its natural cycle to reproduce itself. And so in a way, not only would we not be here without mushrooms, but mushrooms are also here because we help it to move around the world. We help its life cycle to replicate and to continue to strive. So when it comes to the life stage and growth of mycelium, the living organism, the most living organism is actually the mycelium, which is within the wood. In the case of this mushroom, it's a saprophytic mushroom, so it's a decomposing mushroom. It found this piece of branch of tree that fell from this tree, and it's decomposing it back to nature. And so most of the living organism is inside of it itself, but when it's time to produce its fruiting body, first, the mycelium forms into a hyphal knot, and then it begins pinning in its primordial phase, and then it's going to fan out and grow the mushroom. And so in the case of this log, you can actually see the different phases growing, because you have this species, which is Hexagonia species, and then here you have sort of its primordial pinning stage that's been waiting and sitting here for honestly quite a while. I've noticed this in this stage, and I think that it's because of the natural surroundings. It's waiting for some sort of it's waiting for something in nature that's going to, whether it's the drop in temperature or whether it's a bit more rain, or a bit more oxygen, it's waiting for something so that it can really fan out. And so you can see the different mushrooms growing at different times. It's really quite fascinating as it's slowly but surely breaking this log to return it to be soil again. So the way you can identify Hexagonia versus Reishi, here in Reishi you have thousands of polypores, of very small dots, pores on the bottom of the gills, and where there are no gills. And with these ones, actually I can pull this one up, it's pretty much mature. The maturity, by the way, you can tell by the whiteness that's all around. So because the white border of this has already been filled up, then it's mature enough to pick. And of course, there's no harm in picking mushrooms. This is the last stage of its fruiting body life. And so even though I picked it, it's still producing spores. And with the Hexagonia species, one of the ways that you can tell the difference, because on the top it might look like a turkey tail or a reishi because of its orange and yellow hues, but when you look on the bottom you can clearly see that it's a different mushroom, because instead of polypore being on the bottom, it's got these gills that sort of have this beautiful pattern of maze-like and dots, and so therefore it's a Hexagonia species. It's also characterized by not being completely flat. It sort of has this angle that pushes up from the mushroom, and it's these gills, which are a series of pores, which are producing it. So that's the way we know for sure. If this was completely flat and horizontal with thousands, tens of thousands of micropores, and it had this look to it, then it would be a turkey tail mushroom, Tramites versicolor, which is one of the most studied and medicinal mushrooms in the world. And so this one looks very similar. It is non-toxic. It can be used for teas, medicinally. I've come and found some evidence that this has been shown to fight the flu or antiviral. However, there really isn't a lot of research that's done about this mushroom, to be completely honest, because tropical mushrooms, especially certain ones that only grow in the tropics, get just less researched. And it's a really beautiful one as well. It's kind of has a psychedelic look to its bottom, which I always find very attractive. How it also has this maze and texture. It's so beautiful. It's like nature's artwork. And so when we notice it growing on the ground, we can always stop by at least to admire its beauty at the very least. And sometimes it's best to leave it be because it does grow really abundantly, but we can at least always admire the beauty of this mushroom. To identify medicinal mushrooms or to identify edible mushrooms does take research, does take some time and some energy, but it's no different than learning the native plants that grow in your area. Wherever you live in the world, if you know what an oak tree looks like, you know what an oak tree looks like. And if you don't know what an oak tree looks like, well, the whole forest looks like this big natural wonder. But the moment we actually go into learning and studying, we realize that there are characteristics of every single fungus that give it its quality, that give it its look. And I hear a lot from people who don't know or are curious about this. Well, could there be a poisonous look-alike that looks identical to a medicinal or edible mushroom? And the truth is really no. When you know what these things look like, it's like knowing what a leaf looks like. You know what it is. So behind me we have turmeric.
Another medicine that we talk a lot about in our course.
Right, exactly. And when you know what turmeric looks like, the plant, and you identify what the root looks like, you can't be confused by it. It's
Totally.
obvious. It is what it is. You can smell it, you can taste it, and you can be sure, okay, this is turmeric, and I know this is going to be incredibly anti-inflammatory in my body when I mix it into my foods.
Yes.
So the same is applied to mushrooms. When we identify and learn about the different mushrooms that are growing in the forest and around us, we can be sure what is safe to consume and what is medicinal to consume as well. And then also how to prepare those things, whether it's cooking it or whether it's tea or tincture. Something I do recommend, even with especially with wild foraged edible mushrooms, is I do recommend to always cook them.
Yes, we also say that. Yeah, cooking them, or we can marinate them and then dehydrate them at higher temperatures.
Sure.
Yeah, because, like you mentioned earlier, they are not a plant nor an animal. They are a totally different kingdom, right? The fungi kingdom. And so because of that, they have different properties. When we cook them, they don't lose nutrients. They actually can enhance in nutrients. And so all of the powdered medicinal mushroom products that you can buy at the health food store, those are going to be processed already in a few different ways.
Inside of medicinal mushrooms, you have all of these chemical compounds, beta-glucans and polyphenols, that specifically are attacking and helping our immune system boost itself. For example, this reishi that I have in front of us, reishi has 200 medicinal points of contact in the body. So if you need it for an issue with your heart, it will help your heart. If you need it for an issue with your lungs or your throat, it will help there. Your liver, especially your kidneys, they really help clean and detoxify our entire body. But in order to get to the medicine, there are only two ways, because you can't eat this. Medicinal mushrooms like this have very hard wood-like exterior that you don't cook, you don't eat, you can't eat it raw even. You have to take out or extract the medicines in one of two ways, either through hot water, which means you make a tea, or through alcohol. And each one of those ways is going to pull different compounds, different polyphenols, and different beta-glucans out. And so if you really want to make stronger medicine, you actually can do both. You can first make an alcohol extraction, and then you can take the mushrooms out of there and you can do a 6 or 8 hour boil, a long or extended boil to make a really concentrated liquid tea. And then you can mix those two back together in the right percentages to get the full, I like to call it the spirit of the mushroom,
Nice.
but it's all of the properties of the mushroom.
Full spectrum.
Full spectrum,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so we call this dual extract because it's extracted in two different ways.
Correct.
Yeah. So when you buy mushrooms, like if you're going to the store, if you're not comfortable, making your own yet, and you go to the store and you buy powdered mushrooms, you will want to look for dual extract because that's going to be the most medicinal mushroom than if one is just steam extracted or boiled or just a tincture with extracted with alcohol.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're gonna get ready soon and we're gonna meet in our kitchen and we are gonna make a dual extract reishi and chaga tincture. So I'm gonna get really excited for that and we will see you there. Hi!
Hey, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited today to be working with you and with mushrooms and to show about the magical world of medicinal mushrooms.
Yeah, I mean, once you go down the rabbit hole, it's a big one.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, medicinal mushrooms have been used for over 4,000, maybe even longer, years in all different modalities all around the world. So Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. So this is nothing new.
Yeah, totally. It's not just from the past, it's bringing the past into the present because we can use these in so many different aspects of our lives to keep us healthy, to keep us well, and to keep our immune system strong and fierce to fight off everything that is attacking us all the time. So yeah, it's really exciting to be working with some of my favorite mushrooms today. Mushrooms that come from the jungles here that have been wild foraged. And I'm excited to get started.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about these? We saw some of these in the forest when we were in there foraging. But if you want to do a recap, and then why do we have little bowls of mushrooms or pieces of wood here?
Right. So one of my favorite mushrooms to talk about and share about is the reishi. Ganoderma lucidum is its Latin name. There are many different species of reishi that grow all around the world. It is a polypore mushroom, and it is the queen of the medicinal mushrooms, as I like to say, meaning that it can help our entire body. Reishi has over 200 points of contact medicinally in the body, so it will adapt to whatever your body needs. If it's a problem that you have that's liver-based, it will go and find the liver. If it's a tumor that's existing, it will go attack and shrink and fight off the tumor. If it's something else that is ailing you, it's going to help that because really it's the mushroom giving your own body help to heal itself. And that's what it's all about. Our bodies are wonderful healing machines, and these mushrooms give us the ability to fortify our bodies in order to help wherever it's needed. And so that's why I love working with reishi so much, is because it will find where in your body needs the most amount of help, and it's going to give that, it's going to provide that. And so with reishi, this is a really hard mushroom. You can't eat it like this. You can't cook it like you would maybe an oyster mushroom or another gourmet edible mushroom. And so there's only two ways of preparing this into a medicine that we can take in this form. And one is alcohol extraction and the other is a hot water extraction. And so really what you can do is both. And that's what we're going to show you today, is how to do both a dual extraction alcohol-based tincture with a hot water extraction. So this is the reishi, and they come in different sizes and forms. A couple other ones over here. And what we have here in these bowls is we have two different types of mushrooms. We have, again, reishi here. And this is dried and cut up, so it's ready to use into a tincture. In fact, the smaller, a little tip for you guys, the smaller the size of the reishi, it will be best extracted, or you need less time to extract it. So you want to make sure it's cut up in as little pieces as possible. Even more than this, we're going to make sure we cut up a bit more before we add it into the reishi. And this here is chaga. And chaga is another wonderful adaptogen. In the forest, I like to refer to as the prince of the medicinal mushrooms because it is almost as medicinal as reishi, pretty much the same, except this is one that grows really in cold weather climates, right?
Yeah, so growing on birch trees in Canada, essentially. Up in northern Canada, northern Alberta, there's those birch forests, and in those birch forests you will definitely find chaga. But you're not going to stumble upon a piece of chaga growing outside of the birch tree and say, oh look, a mushroom, because it looks more like a woody mass.
Absolutely. In fact, so many people commonly when they're going through the forest, what you know as burl or like a wood rot, oftentimes looks very much the same. How I can associate here is here in the tropics we have a lot of termite nests that look like these big black masses, lumps that are growing on the sides of trees. And chaga looks very similar to that. It's like this big burl rot that grows on the side of a tree, black on the outside, but then when you cut it in, you see this beautiful gold color, and that's how you know it's a true chaga. And chaga, again, is just absolutely incredibly medicinal in very similar ways as reishi for helping our immune system and for boosting it. So also this morning, as I was getting ready to come here, I find, just like nature always seems to provide, I found some edible mushrooms, some oyster mushrooms, Pleurotus species. And this is just an incredibly delicious mushroom. What I love about oyster mushrooms is both their flavor and their abundance. They're actually really easy to grow and to find. It's a widely cultivated mushroom, and it's full of protein. And so this is really just a delicious food. And another thing that I really find interesting when it comes to the health benefits of oyster mushrooms is that there have been certain studies that have shown that in certain communities, especially in Asia and Russia as well, where they do a lot of these studies with mushrooms, communities that eat a high mushroom-based diet, even as little as one time or 2 times a month, show incredibly low rates of cancer.
Wow.
And so I really do believe that a lot of these mushrooms, even the edible ones that we commonly see, maybe not the champignons that you find in the can.
In the can, no.
Maybe not those, but definitely there's so many other types of mushrooms that have different textures, that have different flavors, that have different health benefits, and oysters is definitely one of those that has a lot of different properties to them.
Yeah, so this is like the biggest difference between a medicinal mushroom and a culinary mushroom. Now sometimes culinary mushrooms are also medicinal mushrooms, but the pure medicinal and not culinary are like these woody mushrooms like the reishi, the polypores, the chaga, but then the oyster mushroom, lion's mane, maitake, these mushrooms are medicinal and culinary mushrooms. So we've also got some tinctures here. So these are tinctures. This one you made, and this one comes from a friend of mine here on the island who has made it. And this is the bottle that we're going to be putting our tincture in very soon. So how did you make this again? So this is the dual extract, right?
Right. So this is dual extract, just a reishi tincture from a wild foraged reishi. It was a process that we're going to cover today. This specific batch I let soak for 6 months, which you don't need to soak it for that long, but you can. It will just increase the potency of it. Yeah. And so this was 6 months soaked, and then it was double extracted as well, using the same alcohol and the same method that we're going to show you guys today. Perfect.
Yeah, and you can soak it like a minimum of 2 weeks. But like Justin said, the smaller the pieces, the quicker it happens. So if you have a big chunk, it takes time for the alcohol to penetrate and then pull out the medicinal properties. So just a little powder is going to be a lot better if you want to make it and use it right away. But the longer you let it soak and absorb, the better. All right. So the first step in this process is
the alcohol extraction. And the reason why you do the alcohol before you do the hot water extraction is because you want the mushroom to first, without the water extraction, be soaking in the alcohol for as long as possible. The reason why this happens is because, as you can tell with these polypore mushrooms, they're really wood-like, they're really hard. And so the medicinal properties, which are the beta-glucans and the polyphenols and other things like this, they're inside the hard cell wall thickness of this mushroom, which is why you can't just cook it using heat, or you can't just eat it raw as is. And so what the alcohol allows is to pull away from the inside of its hard wood-like shell. And so the alcohol allows it to extract some of the properties, and then afterwards the hot water allows it to extract other properties. And so you actually get two different types of medicinal properties when you do a dual extraction method.
Yeah.
And so alcohol is the way you want to start with that. So
Yeah.
that's how we're going to start today.
Perfect. So I've got just a jar. We want to use glass. And I'm not going to use this big chunk because, as we mentioned, I'm actually just going to take the smallest little crumbles of the chaga and put it in. All right, so yes, we've got the chaga in here. You could do chaga and reishi. You could do just chaga, just reishi.
Turkey tail, another excellent medicinal mushroom you can make a tincture with.
Yeah, yeah. And earlier you mentioned that the chaga was the prince of mushrooms, and I've always heard it called the king of mushrooms. But before we started the video, you were telling me that there's a different king. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So one of my personal heroes is Paul Stamets. And he has talked about for a long time this mushroom that he's very familiar with that's known as Agaricon. And the Agaricon species is a mushroom that grows pretty much exclusively in the Pacific Northwest. So British Columbia, you would get a good sampling of it, but they're very rare to find. It can take over 100 years to grow a single fruiting body of Agaricon mushroom, but inside of it has incredibly potent antiviral properties. They have been studied by the Department of Defense. They've been studied, I believe right now they finally got clinical permission to study it in relation to the coronavirus.
Wow.
And there are definitely very potent properties in it that break apart and kill viruses. And why they're doing these things is really because the nature of fungus itself. When a fungus is wild in nature, it's encountering a ton of bacteria, it's encountering a lot of viruses, and what its job is to do is to break apart these things. And so it does that in nature. That's why when we consume it, it does the same for us. And this is again why things like penicillin, for example, is a fungus, and other types of molds that we can study and extract different properties for our own bodies have shown to have incredibly potent effects. And so I like to think of Agaricon as the king and reishi as the queen and chaga as the prince. But of course, these are all just generic terms that you can play around with and have fun with.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's amazing. You know, and we're not just saying this based on, other people's experience. This is actually real science right now. It's been scientifically proven that medicinal mushrooms, all mushrooms, boost our immunity. And so you talked about that. Meaning, what does that mean? What does boosting the immunity mean? Well, it means that, this inherent immune system that we have, when we get viruses, when we get bacteria, when things come into our body that doesn't do us well, our bodies have this natural tendency to create a defense system. And the mushrooms, I like to explain it in some other videos that you'll see, that the mushrooms are like the general of the army, or like the principal of the school, who kind of directs the rest of the immune system or the immune cells to do its job, and exactly as you mentioned, to send it to the places that it needs most. So as you mentioned, if whatever's happening in your body, whatever's ailing in your body, the mushrooms are intelligent. They will find that problem and fix it. Well, I mean, ideally they'll fix it, but they will assist in repairing it. Absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I think you touched on something really important. The mushrooms are intelligent. I think that mushrooms are highly intelligent. They're highly conscious. They speak a language we don't understand, but they're the most evolved species here on this planet. And so there's a lot more that we can still learn from them.
Yeah, good point. I love that. So we're just breaking up the reishi into smaller pieces. We're going to add this now to our jar. Here we have a 70 proof.
140 proof, a 70%?
70% alcohol, 140 proof. This is a local alcohol, grain-based alcohol here from Nicaragua. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So this is called Cususa. It's made here on the island of Ometepe, where we are right now. So it's locally produced. It is made from corn. And it is a clean and high percentage alcohol, kind of like a moonshine made in the mountains. But this is sometimes what you can make. And if you're at home, I would try to find the highest percentage alcohol you can find. Above 70% is ideal. It can be close to 100%, that's okay too. And because you're really just consuming a very small amount when you're consuming it in tinctures, in drops, not taking shots of this stuff.
Yeah.
So this is really strong alcohol, but that's good for the extraction purposes that we want it for.
Yeah, perfect, exactly. It looks like water, so it's very, clarified. I would recommend too, like organic vodka. That would work as well. So, you may not have this in your area of town, but you'll definitely have an organic vodka somewhere. So, yeah, so now we just pour it in here, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so got to... All right, is that it?
That's it.
Wow. Okay, you can probably do this at home, folks. What we want to do though is we want to cover it. Perfect. Cover it, and we're going to just sit it in a cool place. I mean, it's not that cool in the tropics, but the coolest place we can find, not in direct sun. Do I want to just leave it and not touch it ever, or do I want to agitate it, or what?
You want to definitely mix it up. If you're storing it for a few weeks, then I would recommend to mix it up at minimum 3 times a week. If you can remember, it's even better to mix it up every day, but don't be so hard on yourself if you forget. It's working. The alcohol is doing its job.
Perfect.
So definitely when you get it, give it a bit of a mix, put it on a shelf somewhere, leave it in your cabinet or on a table or somewhere where you can say hi to it. I like to put it into a place where I can send it positive energy as I'm watching it do its medicine. And I even know somebody who has taken it and buried it in the ground, which I think is a creative and unique way of also storing it, because I do believe that it's very possible that you can leave it and forget it and it will still be fine. You can physically put it somewhere where you're not going to see it every day and know that when you take it out, it'll be okay. So that's it. How easy is that? Anybody can do this. And this is basically taking what you can get in a pharmacy and making it in your own kitchen. How incredible. How easy, how simple. Doesn't get better than this.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the most powerful ways to consume medicinal mushrooms through that dual extraction process, because it pulls out the most benefit. All right. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, we have our finished product. Wow. So, yes, obviously we just did that, but we imagine that 2 weeks have passed. And now what do I do with my jar?
So now what you want to do is you want to separate out the mushrooms and hold on to the alcohol aside, because the alcohol is going to come back in the second part when you want to turn it into the bottle. And so what you want to do is you drain the alcohol and the mushrooms. So I'm going to open this up. Amazing. The longer it soaks, the darker the shade of the alcohol will become. But you can see very clearly how quickly it changes from white to the discoloration. That's what you're looking for.
Perfect. So, because this isn't actually a 2 week, we're going to put it back all together. But, so now we take this, and what do we do with this? We just set this aside.
For now, you just set this aside, and it's the mushrooms, now that they've been soaked, is what you want to take the next step. So then the mushrooms, what you want to do is you want to do a hot water extraction, which is a really fancy way of saying you make a tea. You make a tea, and you want to make it as concentrated as possible. That's going to be best, especially as you combine it. So you want to look at how much quantity of alcohol you have to give you a sense of how much water you have, because the rough percentage is like 3.5 to 1, 4 to 1, 3 to 1, something like this, alcohol to water. And so that's the finished water. And so of course water is going to boil away. And so you want to make sure you get the right quantity of water to the right amount of mushrooms, and then you want to boil it.
Perfect.
And the amount of time that you want to boil it for is a minimum of 30 minutes. If you boil it for an hour, it might be even more potent. Again, it's also going to depend on how small the pieces you are. So the smaller when it's in powder or it's in crumbs like this, 30 minutes is going to be just fine. If there are slightly bigger pieces, you want to give it more time to boil.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah, and so then these mushrooms get used twice. They get used in the alcohol, and then they get boiled.
So we had this water boiling for around an hour, and it's a dark colored tea, and we're going to now strain out the mushrooms once again to separate out the water and the mushrooms.
Oh, wow.
And now what you actually can do with the leftover mushrooms, once it's been extracted for a couple weeks, in the alcohol and you've made the tea, you can now dispose of it.
Okay.
Now it's pretty much done.
Compost.
Compost,
Perfect.
exactly. Everything go back to the soil.
Back to the earth.
And you have two different based liquids. You have an alcohol-based liquid, which has been extracted for a while, and you have a water-extracted tea. And now all you do is you combine the two. The other thing about, in terms of dose or time of the day, because this is an adaptogen, find the time of the day that works for you. For a lot of people, pretty high percentage of the population actually, this really helps with stress and helping with sleep as well. So I find that for most people, it's best effective when taken just before bedtime because it really relaxes the body and allows us to sleep well. I have a very good friend of mine who actually takes some of this stuff every single night, and he tells me about all of his amazing dreams since he started taking Reishi tincture.
Wow.
Now, that's not necessarily a side effect, or it's not necessarily what it does, but it definitely has, because it's an adaptogen, it can definitely find whatever your body needs, and it gives you that. And so in terms of the dosage for something like this, 5 to 10 drops, 1 drop, 2 drop, it's up to you to decide, but you don't need that much when it's more concentrated. And you can just put it on or under the tongue.
Yeah, under the tongue it will be absorbed faster.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go for it.
Go for
it's
it.
It's not nighttime, but I'm gonna go for it.
Any time of day. I also find for myself, reishi gives me a lot of energy. So sometimes I like to take it in the daytime, or when I go on hikes. When I go on hikes or when I do something really physical, I feel like I need to take some reishi because it does help my body from not getting fatigued, from not getting tired, and I feel strong and energized to go give a full day of work.
Amazing. So for this module, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make your own dual extract medicinal mushroom tincture. Now you can go and you can buy pre-dried pre-slices of whole reishi, whole chaga, so you're absolutely certain that that's what you're getting. You can also find, the turkey tail mushroom.
Chaga grows in cold weather climates. In Canada, northern US, you find lots of chaga growing, especially on birch trees.
Birch, yeah, exactly. So if you find someone in your area who knows a lot about mushrooms, you can always go on a little foraging adventure, and then you can find and get your own wild mushrooms and then prepare your tincture and your extract from that. But if you don't have that opportunity, or maybe it's winter when you're watching this video, you could definitely find dried mushrooms already whole in their whole form, and then you can make your tincture and your extract out of those.
And there's a really exciting community of people online that are very enthusiastic about mushrooms too. There are mushroom identification pages on social media, Facebook, Instagram, etc., that are very passionate people. And so I find when I find a new mushroom that I've never seen before, or I don't know 100%, because we're always students, even though we're teachers, we're always students at the same time.
Yes.
There are so many resources online to find, and as a community of people who want to help each other learn more about the fungal kingdom. It's a big world out there. There's so many different types of mushrooms growing everywhere, and it's very exciting to dive into it and to have a beautiful day in nature, to forage. And then it's even more exciting when you forage and you're finding things that are bringing home into your kitchen or into your medicine cabinets, coming directly from the forests of nature, and we can feel good about that because it is good stuff.
Yeah, and that's the whole cycle, the whole cycle of life, and the whole reason that, we are connected to everything around us, and the food that we eat nourishes our body on more levels than we even know. And medicinal mushrooms have been used for centuries, millennia, in other cultures, like in Ayurveda, in traditional Chinese medicine.
The emperors of China, they used to drink this stuff every single day. They called it ling shi, which translates into the mushroom of vitality or the mushroom of immortality, I've heard some people say. And they built statues of reishi mushrooms, which also tells you what things were important to them when you are literally building statues to a mushroom.
Yeah.
And so, for thousands of years, they really worshiped this stuff.
Wow.
This was something that they would take on a daily basis.
Wow.
And so very fortunately for us and everywhere around the world, this still grows. And so we don't have to be the emperor of China to get access to this medicine. Everyday common people, all of us around us, with just a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of time, we can make our own. And so that's a really powerful information and tools to have in our brain up here in our toolbox to know how to work with all this stuff, because it is available and it is available for everybody. I'm really excited, and thanks for having me on to talk about mushrooms, and it's wonderful to be here.
Yeah.